my name's Simon O'Gorman. I am a business owner. So I own a couple of businesses, Adapt IT, which some people may have heard of, which is a company that provides IT and gaming for people with disabilities. And I'm also a cybersecurity specialist, where I specialize in helping people protect themselves against the growing cyber threat.
So I know that from speaking to you on a personal level, you mentioned that you've got mental health problems that you deal with, and you use gaming and painting Warhammer to help you. How did that come about? And is that kind of why you work with Adapt IT, and that is your baby? I know you've got a daughter, but it's also like your other baby.
Yeah, sure. So I guess they would class it as a mental episode, or a bit of a breakdown in 2007. I'm very focused on my work, but I'm also, I guess you could say, quite emotional, in the sense that I get really attached to the things that I'm doing, and I really struggle to separate what I want to achieve from what's expected of me. So I tend to go into quite a lot of overdrive, and if I don't achieve something that I've set out to achieve, or somebody has perceived, or more to the point, I've perceived something not being good enough for what I wanted to achieve, it tends to impact me in quite a hard way. When it happened the first time, I was working on quite a high profile project for quite a large company at the time. And I don't know what happened. I just went from, me being my usual cheerful, really engaged self, to suddenly everything just sort of piled on top of me. And then, I just wanted to be in a corner, stay away from people, and deal with nothing. I just wasn't interested in anything. If people would talk to me, I would close into myself and, lock myself away, basically. And it soon became apparent that I needed help with that. So gaining medical advice and things like that, I then went on medication to control it. And, those of you that suffer from mental health challenges, the medication only goes so far, and you need other things to take you either out of the situation that is causing the issue at any particular time, or you need something to distract yourself from what it is that's causing you those issues. And for me, that is gaming and painting little gray space models. For me, it's just completely different from what I deal with on my day-to-day business, and just being able to go into a corner on my own, listening to an audio book, which tends to be science fiction as well, and applying paint, badly may I add, to little grey miniatures, or going into another world. I'll play, I like retro games. So, even a 30-minute blast on something like Centipede, or one of my favorite go-to games is Robocop on the ZX Spectrum, just brings me back down slightly, enables me to put things into perspective slightly.
And I guess it must provide you with a sense of community, because you've got that network of people who are also enjoy the same thing as you, that you can then talk to. Because I think I'm not speaking on behalf of all men, but like men in general do find it harder to talk about their emotions and how they're feeling. So do you think having that community helps you?
I do, actually. And I think the communities that I have in my workplace as well, just simply, people understand potentially what you're going through. I mean, everybody will know that when you're struggling with your own demons, the only person that can really understand those demons is yourself. But they do, because you can talk about things that you have in common. You can talk about, when it comes to the Warhammer paint schemes and the factions of Marines that I particularly follow, and I'm an ultramarine at heart, which, if you were to put it to the football world, is the same as following Manchester United, really. It's the most popular one because it's there. But and with gaming, I don't really play with a community within gaming, but I have a lot of friends that game. and being able to talk to them about the latest games or what they're enjoying at the time or what I'm playing and how badly I'm doing, etc., really does help keep things
And
into perspective.
obviously there's things like mindfulness and meditation and stuff, and obviously with this, I assume that when you're painting and when you're really like focused on that object and the intricacies of each item, that must be quite therapeutic for you.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've never thought of it of mindfulness, but it is taking yourself to another place. At that point in time, there's nothing else you can focus on, because the 32 mil scale, so they're only about an inch, maybe an inch and a half tall. So when you're kind of there peering at your little figure with your color, that's the only thing that you can think of. And I guess you do kind of go into, not that I could really say what a meditative state is, but you do go into your own world. It's you, that little model, and the paint that you're putting on that figure at any given time.
And what have you taken away from this experience? Obviously you spoke about the challenge at the start and then where you are now. What have you learned along that way about yourself and about how gaming and about painting the minifigures that you've talked about has helped you?
Yeah, I think engaging with the communities in each one of those, it has made me realize that I'm not alone. I mean, we're quite geeky and nerdy in that sense, and I've always been quite proud that I'm a geek and a nerd. I love technology and I love cool things like that. And it's kind of strange, but a lot of the people that I've engaged both through Warhammer and through gaming have that mental health challenge that they're dealing with. And I know people say that it's a modern day pandemic. I think it's only just being realized properly. I mentioned to you that I kind of felt like one of the hidden, because I think coming from somebody that was born in the 70s, and you see this from my father as well, you never talk about your emotions. If you've got a problem, you just suck it up and get on with it. And you never let it interfere with anything you're doing, which unfortunately tends to compound the challenges and the stress. And you don't feel like you can go anywhere. I mean, I'm really lucky. I'm married. I've got two fantastic kids. I've got two reasonably successful businesses. And yet, to me, whatever I did was never good enough. Which kind of seems a bit ironic, really. Well, how can you think that? You've got something that a lot of people would like. You're luckier than most, and yet that just didn't seem good enough to you. And it doesn't have to be a big thing either. It could be, I get an email in the morning that I read in the wrong way, and that will just throw me out for the entire day. And all I'll be able to think about is how I have interpreted that email, or the small thing that I think I may not have done. And it could be completely insignificant, and yet it'll completely wipe you out for a day, 2 day, maybe even 3 days sometimes, where you just can't function properly. You just can't think.
And how do you find that work-life balance now? How do you plan for if you know that it might be a stressful day, or you have started the day with a triggering situation like an email or something? How do you then plan for the rest of the day and make sure that you're mentally well?
Badly, I think is the answer to that. So I'll normally just carry on regardless. I have got better in the sense that I'll take myself out of that situation. So going back to gaming again, I'll go and jump on my Atari 2600, have a quick game of Pac-Man or Galaxian or something like that for 15-20 minutes just to reset. And then I'll go back into the office. But I'm really lucky that I've got some understanding people in the office. And sometimes they'll go, you know what, we think you should probably go and take a walk. So I'll go and do that. I think as I've got older, I've got used to the fact that actually there are more important things. So I do take time out for myself now, which I never used to do. So, you know, a couple of hours on the evening to paint a figure or to start painting a figure or something like that is good. And then the rest of the time will be, you know, spending time with my kids, although, you know, my daughter's 20 now, my son's 17, so they don't really want to spend time with me at the moment, but, you know, when I can, we try for that. If not, I've got podcasts that I listen to. I talk to people, you know, I talk to you, I talk to my friends that play games, and just think about other things, and that helps tremendously.
You mentioned earlier about feeling like one of the hidden. Do you think it's become easier for you and for other people to open up about their mental health from where you were when you were younger?
I think for me, yes. I think for a lot of people, no. I think that definitely people sort of Gen X, Gen Z, maybe millennials, it's still quite difficult, simply because, you know, we were raised by people where it wasn't the thing to do. You know, mental health didn't really exist. If you had a problem, you just had to deal with it. You know, it was just one of those things. And, you know, on LinkedIn recently, there was a gentleman that had posted and then sadly had taken his life after he posted on LinkedIn. And that isn't an isolated case. And I think for men generally, it's still difficult because, you know, traditionally, and I know things are changing with the way people think about things, but traditionally men do think that, you know, they need to provide, they need to look after their families, they need to be able to work in order to achieve that. And if they don't, it does hit quite hard. And, you know, you go to the doctor and they go, yeah, of course we can help. You might be able to see somebody in a couple of years if you're lucky. So that means going to a group you don't necessarily know, and that's a really big step. And I have to say, I didn't do that. I didn't need to. I was lucky I had really good friends around me. But I think for a lot of people, that support or that ability to speak out still isn't there.
And just leading on from that, and to kind of draw us to a close, what would be your advice to yourself back when you were really struggling, given what you know now and what you've reflected on and stuff? What advice would you give yourself?
Talk to somebody. Find somebody that you trust, and then talk to them about your problems and tell them what it is that triggers, and then come up with a plan. So one of the things I did is every time I felt particularly bad, I would write down what it was that triggered it and how I felt. Because actually I found that you can describe things in words, me personally, than I could discussing it. And then either my wife or the confidant that I was working with, I could give them that, and then they could understand, one, the frequency that I was feeling particularly low, but also kind of what it was I was thinking at the time, so that we could understand the patterns and then work with those patterns to try and, I guess, get me back into a position of being able to think a little straighter.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Simon.
No problem. Thank you, Chandy.
That without healing. You literally can't do one without the other. If you choose to heal, you're kind of manifesting a better life for yourself, because you're, you know, healing those wounds and like sort of getting out of your own way. But then if you want to manifest, you literally can't do that until you've healed. Or